Hello, my name is Tanya Round, and today I will introduce you to the Islamic philosopher Ibn Sina, who is also known as Avicenna in the West. Avicenna was a philosopher during the golden age of Islamic philosophy. As some of you might remember, there were actually three golden ages in Islam. The religious golden age started with the birth of Muhammad and with the formation of the Quran in the 7th century AD. The imperial golden age took form in the 16th and the 17th centuries, when Islamic civilization dominated the world under the rule of the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals. Avicenna then was part of the golden age of Islamic philosophy and science, which lasted from the 9th through the 12th centuries. One of Avicenna's major contributions to Islamic philosophy is the suspended man argument, which establishes that the self not only exists apart from the body, but that the self also has a continuous and direct knowledge of its own existence. This argument is significant because it provides a philosophical justification for the famous hadith of Prophet Muhammad: "He who knows himself knows his Lord." By virtue of knowing himself, the suspended man acquires an immediate and direct knowledge of God, since the suspended man knows that he exists. The suspended man argument is sometimes also known as the flying man argument, and it appears at the end of the Psychology, or Al-Nafs, where Avicenna explains the existence and nature of the soul. Avicenna argues as follows: "The one among us must imagine himself as though he is created all at once, and is created perfect, but that his sight has been veiled from observing external things, that he is created suspended in the air or in the void, in a manner where he would not encounter air resistance, so he could not feel, and his limbs are separated from each other, so that they neither meet nor touch. He must then reflect as to whether he will affirm the existence of his self, datahu. He will not doubt the presence of his self, according to Avicenna, because he is existing, but from this he will not affirm any limb from among his organs, nor will he affirm any internal organ, whether heart or brain, and certainly not any external thing. Rather, he would be affirming his self without affirming for it any length, breadth, or depth. And if in this state he were able to imagine a hand or some other organ, he would not imagine it as part of his self or as a condition for any part of its existence." Avicenna continues: "You know that what is affirmed is other than what is not affirmed, and what is acknowledged is other than what is not acknowledged. Hence the self whose existence he has affirmed has the special characteristic of its being his very self, which is other than his body and organs that have not been affirmed. Hence the one who affirms this existence has a means to be alerted to the existence of the soul as something distinct from the body, and to his being he is directly acquainted with and aware of it. If he is oblivious to this, he would require educative prodding," concludes Avicenna. So, by laying down his argument, Avicenna attempts to establish the existence of a self or a soul that is independent from the body. The soul, of which Avicenna tells us has no form, no shape, no color, and it also has no content either. It simply has no qualities other than pure being itself. Now, if we should ask the suspended man to describe himself in such a state, he would only say that he is. Consequently, there is no distinction between his being and being itself. Given that there is no principle by which the suspended man can differentiate between his existence and this awareness of his existence, Avicenna argues that self-existence and self-awareness must amount to the same principle. In Western philosophy, Avicenna's argument is typically analyzed in the context of the mind-body dualism, since it makes an inspiring case for the existence of the soul. In Islamic philosophy, however, Avicenna's contribution is much more profound. By equating self-awareness with self-existence, Avicenna confirms that knowing oneself is the same as knowing existence. For Avicenna, this means knowing God. Avicenna writes, self-awareness is essential to the soul. It is not acquired from outside. It is as if, when the self comes to be, awareness comes to be along with it. Our awareness of ourselves is our very existence. Self-awareness is natural to the self, for it is its existence itself, so there is no need for anything external by which we perceive the self. Rather, the self is that principle by which we perceive the self. In other words, existence as the true non-dual principle of being in the ultimate sense is God. Therefore, Avicenna says that awareness of existence is awareness of God, which for the suspended man is just his natural state of being. It is in this sense that Muhammad's hadith comes to fruition. He who knows himself knows his Lord. However, in spite of his contribution to Islamic philosophy, Avicenna's significance in the Islamic tradition remains controversial. In his work on the incoherence of the philosophers, Al-Ghazali criticizes the philosophers, including Avicenna, for his heavy reliance on Greek philosophy even when it contradicts the Quran and the words of the Prophet. As a proponent of the Ash'ari school, Al-Ghazali condemns Avicenna's philosophy as innovation or bid'ah. The Avicennian theory, which Al-Ghazali singled out as being utterly contrary to Islamic belief, is the idea of the immortality of the soul without bodily resurrection. Al-Ghazali's concern is that Avicenna's view on the nature of the soul makes it impossible to receive rewards and punishment in the hereafter. Given that this teaching directly contradicts the Quran, which in the Ash'ari Kalam is the uncreated eternal word of God, it constitutes what Al-Ghazali would call self-evident unbelief. Anyone who held these beliefs was an apostate then, who, by the laws of the Sharia, was deserving of death. Yet, after discussing the problem of reward and punishment in the hereafter, Avicenna maintains that spiritual rewards are higher than physical rewards, although he does not explicitly deny physical rewards in heaven. Consequently, some modern Islamic scholars have argued that Avicenna did not think that his theory on the nature of the soul would in any way contradict the Quran, at least directly. Rather than denying the concept of bodily resurrection, Avicenna appears to indicate that there is an element of indeterminism in bodily resurrection, over which God has the power if he wills it, if and when he wills it. After Al-Ghazali, the next great commentator on Avicenna was Fakhr al-Din al-Razi, who lived from 1150 to 1210 AD. Even though al-Razi was also a prolific contributor to Ash'ari theology and was also a critical commentator of the philosophers, he still found value in Avicenna's philosophy. Among other doctrines, al-Razi accepted the three-part structure of the soul that Avicenna had adopted from the Greek philosopher Plato. According to Plato, the lower parts of the soul must yield to the logos or reason, which guards our soul against the corruptive powers of the appetites. The will, which is located in between the appetitive and the rational parts of the soul, is the force that triggers us to act. This seems to contradict the classical Ash'ari doctrine of kasb, the deterministic notion that humans acquire their acts directly from Allah. Yet, whether or not Avicenna was a true believer or an unbeliever, he was nevertheless a remarkable philosopher whose contributions to the Neoplatonic philosophy continue to echo in the 21st century. Even still, his status as Muslim is contested among Orthodox Muslims who view his work as innovation since it is not founded on the Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this video, and thank you so much for watching.